Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, May 10th, 2018, believe it or not. Time for another show. Time to catch up on the news. I can't believe it. Oh, my God. Drain the swamp, etc., etc. Lots of news to come, no doubt. Probably as we are speaking, of course, Greg Dworkin has rounded up a number of Thursday, as he likes to point out, Thursday stories to bring forward. And, yeah, I mean, it's getting pretty crazy out there. Like, how much longer can this go on without some breaking point? I noticed Mike Pence, I guess, out there playing the, it's enough already with this investigation, it's time to wrap it up game, which, I was saying this morning that each time somebody makes this argument, we find ourselves miraculously on the cusp of yet another, moving to another level, another depth, I guess, of scandal. But I don't know that it's actually related to their calls for ending the investigation, or vice versa, that their calls for ending the investigation are some signal that they know some new level of scandal is about to break. I think it's just that's something they say every day, and the scandals come so thick and fast in this administration, and they, crunch all you want, they'll make more. But I think it's just coincidence. There's going to be a new scandal every hour with this administration, and they're also going to, as people do, call for ends to the investigations into themselves. So I don't know that there's any kind of cause and effect here, but just thinking of like this last round of stuff, Mike Pence's call for ending the investigation is not new, and it's not new for him, but every day there's a call to end the investigation. Had those calls been heeded at any point, like if they had been heeded at the last moment at which they were made prior to this new one, you would not, and people had complied with it, I guess you wouldn't know about all of the pay-for-play money that has allegedly shown up in Michael Cohen's account from major corporate sponsors and Russian oligarchs, which is about as blatant a raft of evidence of bribery. Well, I guess I should say it would have been a raft of evidence of bribery prior to the Bob McDonnell exoneration, and I guess to some extent the subsequent Bob Menendez exoneration. Except this just does feel deeper and more blatant. There's clearly no personal friendship between the CEO of Novartis and Michael Cohen. You couldn't even convince the CEO of Novartis that the $1.2 million that they already paid to Michael Cohen was worth having paid him in the first place. Today's elaborations on those stories. One, yes, the original figure I think that was circulating, I guess it was the AT&T figure that was circulating was $200,000. That's, of course, way up as well. Novartis, I think, was weighing in it's something in the neighborhood of $400,000. It's now up to $1.2 million. And the story has become that now they are willing to say, and I mean, they really had no other choice but to say, yeah, it was a lobbying expense. We were paying Michael Cohen for his connections, which is about as close to legalized bribery as we've got in the country. And I say legalized. That part of it is okay. It shouldn't be, but we don't know how to outlaw it effectively in this country, I guess, and still allow for situations where people are just friends and want to give cars and golf clubs and vacations to their friends in office. Except Michael Cohen, A, not in office, B, not a friend, and C, as it turns out, not able to provide anything close to the level of understanding of the issues necessary or the access desired. And part of the Novartis story this morning is that they realized very quickly that they had made a $1.25 million mistake, but they were afraid to back out of it because they were afraid that word would get back to Donald Trump that they had backed out of it, and that would make him angry, and therefore Novartis would be a big policy loser and money loser as a result of having angered the president. Don't anger the woo, that's what they say, and the woo can, of course, be, it's no coincidence that it's fueled by orange soda, I guess. Who knows? Where the hell else am I going to take today's stories? There's lots to go into. Let's see. Also, I guess from the historical perspective, you should see Kevin Cruz tweeting out the photographic evidence that, yes, after 1 year of the Mueller investigation, Pence says it's time to wrap it up, but the same was true after a year of the Watergate investigation, except it was Nixon, not Pence, saying, yeah, enough is enough already. The Whitewater investigation, of course, was several years long and found hardly anything with respect to the actual Whitewater issues, naturally. This one bearing much more fruit. And, all right, well, what else can we move on with? Well, Bill begins us with a suggested morning tweet. Daily Kos Radio is live now. Here's what we'll do today for $500,000. For $500,000, it turns out, I learned these things at the last minute myself. Kagro X, that's me, for $500,000. I will provide you with insights into understanding President Trump's golf, tweet, and cheeseburger habits. Or maybe he won't, but he still gets to keep your money. And that's essentially how the program went for Michael Cohen, who was unable to provide any of the things that Novartis wanted. But I guess they're not the only story. Novartis is out there. There's also Columbus Nova, which I didn't even know what the heck that was. And as it turns out, it is wholly owned American subsidiary having nothing to do with Russia. Just happens to be run by cousin of a Russian oligarch who's totally American citizen since 2014 or whatever. I don't know. I don't know when he became a citizen. It's just a little wacky that the Russians are into this stuff so deep, and it's all coincidence, no doubt. That and many more coincidences to be revealed today. Greg Dworkin, by coincidence, likely has probably something in the neighborhood of half a dozen of them. Hi, how you doing, Greg?
Hi, we're doing great.
Good.
You know, I used to work with a doctor
That's a good idea.
was born in St. Petersburg and then emigrated to the United States as a kid.
Yes.
But like a teenager, so he still remembers what it was like living in the old Soviet Union. And I once said to him, so what was it like there? And he said, it really wasn't so bad. I mean,
Okay.
basically, we pretended to work and they pretended to pay us.
Yeah. That's probably about what it felt like. And
Yeah.
that's
So
why
it's
they're
okay,
doing it
you know,
here.
but
Michael Cohen
the thing about this whole Michael Cohen thing, and I have
The
a
whole
really
thing.
interesting piece to talk with you about by Peter Hamby
Yes. Okay.
in Vanity Fair about what John Edwards should teach the media about how to cover scandals. But the thing about Michael Cohen is, I mean, there's just some fantastic, tweets out there, just like Bill's. Noah Rothman said, "I am shocked, sir, shocked that you, Mr. Cohen, have misled me into thinking that you were an expert in molecular biology.
That is crazy.
I will now angrily storm out and protest, conveniently forgetting the briefcase and the $250,000 in 20s that I left here."
Yeah.
And that's about the level of what it feels like. Stat News, which covers health care stuff, it's a Boston Globe vertical.
Oh, okay.
Trump's lawyer pitched himself as a fixer to Novartis and got paid $1.2 million. But the point is, Novartis didn't come to him; he went to Novartis.
Yes. Hi, I'm an expert.
Right? A Novartis source tells Stat News that Cohen came to them promising access to not just Trump, but also the circle around him.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hiring him as a lobbyist. Of course, he was an unregistered lobbyist.
Yes, that's a problem too. Yeah, well, I mean, the fact that that's the story about Novartis, I think, should suggest to you, considering that he has no expertise whatsoever in any area they would be interested in, I think we can assume that he was also calling some other people. This was probably like number 85 on their list.
Right,
His
but still,
list.
it was kind of fun.
Oh, it was a good story. It means that there's worse to come.
Yeah, but it's just kind of fun, everybody pointing out that each individual industry or company that called Cohen, or Cohen called, it's hard to tell which is which, really made him out to be the super Renaissance man. We were talking that on the show yesterday. It's like he has this expertise in everything.
Well, he knows taxis
like
and
Chuck Norris jokes about, he could do this and he could do that and he could do this. And, you look at this and say, what in the world did anybody think Michael Cohen had expertise on? And there's only one thing. He knew Donald Trump's phone number.
Yeah, and he knew Donald Trump so well, and Donald Trump trusted him and gave him such great access that he thought he was going to be...
Yeah, you can see how well they got along in public now, right?
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to be chief of staff. You're not going to be chief of staff. I'm going to be campaign manager.
Allow you to do that.
Yeah, I've never seen him hustle food the way he made Chris Christie do. That's true. But yeah, this is a guy who thought he was going to be campaign manager and figured probably he had a shot after they fired the first campaign manager, but still no. And then after the second firing, no. And I'm going to be chief of staff, no. But give me $1 million. I have access to him. I've never seen you actually together since inauguration.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if somebody who gets treated like crap, who can't barely get a job with the Trump administration whatsoever, is worth $1.2 million, then what is it worth for somebody who actually has access?
Right. I don't know. And who has access? Hope Hicks missed out. What was she? Unless she escaped with millions.
We're not there. So,
right.
By the way, you're talking about Jared and Ivanka.
I am? Good.
Well, yeah. I mean, how much access are they worth?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question.
Why do they get invited to things? It's not because they're experts on anything either. They know less about the topics they're talking about than Michael Cohen does.
But talk about a stock crash.
But they have access.
I think everybody thought they did. They certainly had the illusion of it and enough to cash in if they were smart to go and grab smart.
Let me correct you there.
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about as if they had influence.
Oh,
I'm not saying they had influence.
Oh, right.
I'm saying they have access.
That's true. They have to bring the grandkids into the Oval Office every couple of hours.
At any time. Ivanka can walk in any meeting at any time with any world leader and say, excuse me, I was just stopping by, let me listen in.
Right.
Even though she doesn't have security clearance. And that's been true, and it's still true, because Trump sees her as a little mini-me. He doesn't see her as anything but an extension of himself, except for when he wants her to be his girlfriend.
Yes, a template for others.
So, the whole idea that Jared and Ivanka could peddle access in order to, let's say, prop up their real estate empire is not such a crazy thing. And that's the part of it that, shouldn't be lost. You step back a little, and I was watching some of the reaction, especially from conservatives yesterday, about all the news about how Michael Cohen was really, 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 a crook. And you know what the reaction was? This goes on in D.C. all the time.
Yeah.
It's just that, companies always pay this kind of access. It's just as public now.
And I mean, that's not
is
entirely...
that what they mean by drain the swamp? Firstly, I don't think it's necessarily true. That's not the way they do it. And secondly, even if it were, that's it's like the worst kind of whataboutism.
Yes, well, it is terrible whataboutism. Lots of money changes hands based on people's Rolodexes, but they are quality Rolodexes for one thing.
Yeah, and you hire a lobbyist. I mean, that's how it's done.
And the lobbyist registers. People cash in, but there are some limits to
rules.
It. Yes,
it's a process.
Yes. And that's like, no, we don't do that. And of course, I love the story from the Novartis side of, he's horrible. It's a huge waste of money, but we can't quit or the president will get mad.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like Noah Rothman's tweet. We'll just leave the money here in 20s.
Yeah.
And you can use it for your taxi stuff. So the whole thing about this being an incredible conflict of interest, let alone scandal, I think is only now seeping into the public consciousness.
Okay.
And here's a piece by Peter Hamby called People Get Subpoenas. Crap Gets Real. That's not the word he used. What John Edwards should teach the media about covering Trump. If you were in Las Vegas and could win $1 million by placing a simple prop bet on whether Trump enjoyed some pea play with Russian hookers in Moscow in 2013, would you bet yes or no?
Can I? I'm not in Las Vegas, but I mean, can I maybe by phone or internet do this?
I don't know. It's just this is a hypothetical here. It's a thought experiment.
All right.
Except maybe you can. I don't know. But there's maybe with Ladbroke at one of the London.
It's time for our break. We'll be right back. I got to get some money. Hold on.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Right. So, you know where you'd put your money. Even Mitch McConnell would take that bet, says Peter Hamby.
Ew. All right.
When BuzzFeed News published the Steele dossier in January of 2017, much of the media universe rushed to condemn the release of an unverified document that made a series of explosive accusations about Donald Trump and his campaign's dealings with Russia. Never mind that the claims included in the dossier are a key piece of the special counsel's investigation, or that the dossier was being circulated around the highest levels of American government on the cusp of a new presidency. There was a righteous journalism debate to be had. Brian Stelter of CNN compared BuzzFeed to WikiLeaks. NBC's Chuck Todd told BuzzFeed, Ben Smith, you published fake news. Even Bob Woodward, the high priest of investigative journalism, labeled the dossier and lashed it, calling it a garbage document.
That looks great.
Yeah, well, that's funny. That's what Peter says. It was a weird look for the news media, opting to give Trump, a man with a decades-long record of telling mistruths, double-dealing, obscuring facts, dodging responsibility, and trashing journalists, the benefit of the doubt.
Don't lie. Over
a news organization working in the public's interest to keep powerful people accountable. The journalistic tut-tutting feels even weirder in hindsight now that we're in the midst of a near-daily fire hose of lies, leaks, emanating from an administration with a demonstrated contempt for the truth and a flagrant disregard for the traditional ways of doing business in Washington. We were just talking about some of those traditional ways. Trump should never get the benefit of the doubt. Yes, that's partly because he's Trump, a guy who admitted to a biographer a few years ago he still has a temperament of a first grader, but it's also because Trump is a politician, and even the most well-intentioned politicians deserve the suspicion of the press, not our good faith. I wish people would in the press would just read this and absorb this.
That's a good one.
This is the whole thing, afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted. And
no mention of Michelle Wolf in this, though, which, I mean, okay, it doesn't have to be in here, but everyone should read it in that context as well. Like, you guys just did this again, so that's how much I know that you didn't learn your lesson. Tut-tutting again. Exactly it.
Right. Trump's history, mendacity, and dubious associations, see Cohen, Michael, require a new kind of thinking in the news world and even deeper skepticism from the press. There's too much tedious soul-searching in journalism, many old-school homilies, too many painful attempts at forced balance. Just watch Meet the Press with Chuck Todd any afternoon. That's me adding. Yes. Balance is a feeble idea that exists only in American political journalism, where truth is just a two-dimensional political concept that lies somewhere between Republican and Democrat. Fairness is something else entirely. The best obtainable version of the truth, as Woodward and Bernstein are fond of saying, reporters should stop worrying about the 40% of the public, the representatives in Congress who blindly agree with Trump at every turn. The truth is that aggressive confrontational journalism is revealing more scandals per week than we used to uncover in a year. Trump proves the necessity of an unshackled press. Trump also proves on a nearly daily basis he's unworthy of our trust. I mean, this is just so true. It's amazing it has to be said.
Yes.
And then he says the latest reminder is just listen to Rudy Giuliani.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? It occurs to me, this idea, it's funny, even if you credit the idea of balance, and I don't know why you would, but if you wanted to credit a version of the idea of balance, I was just thinking about Trump having threatened yesterday, apparently. He's got the press mad again, briefly. Oh, I might revoke press credentials for people who print, negative stories about me, which are by definition fake news. He did double duty in that tweet. Anything that's bad about me is fake news, and I might revoke your press credentials as well. And that has them in an uproar, of course. But it struck me that I guess he was complaining that Fox and Friends told him yesterday morning on television that 90% of the newspaper coverage of him was negative, and so in his mind, therefore, fake. And that was evidence that there was no balance, that 90% of the news was negative. And it sort of occurred to me, like, maybe it takes 90% negative press what does it take to provide balance in the overall ecosystem where the administration telling their side of the story is always saying It's the best. It's historic. Nothing ever like it in history. Everyone is saying it. I have 100% agreement among the public that I'm the most fabulous and handsome and virile man ever to occupy any office. Or, how do you balance that other than by saying, here are the things that are not fantastic?
Right. So, he mentions the actual working press and makes this observation. Truth-seeking is genuinely hard for beat reporters, especially when you're in it every single day. You're talking to sources at all hours, some loyal to the president, some only kind of loyal, some with proximity to real information, some trafficking in third-hand gossip. People that you genuinely like tell you something and you think, maybe Trump didn't actually do that awful thing. Maybe we're being too hard on him. You can't burn or antagonize these sources because you need them. You look at your Twitter mentions and second guess yourself, am I being fair? And you're under a huge amount of deadline pressure from your bosses in a news world where scoops and cable bookings are the coin of the realm. And add to that how entire administrations and political parties and business and media interests are mobilized to obfuscate, deny, and lie on the behalf of a president. Keep that in mind, by the way, when we're talking about Iran and North Korea.
Yes, good point.
There's so much energy being exerted on the right to disaggregate and cast doubt on the stories about, and then they talk about Cohen shady real estate dealings, Russians dumping money into LLCs, because don't forget, a lot of this Cohen stuff has to do with the fact that Russian money is being dumped in there.
Yes.
And what did I hear on cable news yesterday? Well, what kind of oligarch is this guy? Is he super close to Putin? Is he only mildly close to Putin? Does he do favors for Putin? Is he on the outs from Putin? It doesn't matter.
What do you mean by Dr. Evil? I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Sure.
And then there's Manafort's oligarch fluffing, Stormy and Karen McDougal, and Shara Beshart, I guess. Is that the one that...
That's the fake Broidy one.
Yeah. They're not connected. Everybody had the best of intent. There's no wrongdoing. Collusion isn't a crime. All the women are liars. Next question. In the day-to-day churn of Trump's Washington, when the rules just aren't the same as they were even a few years ago, it's tough to know what's real, what's not, what's big, and what's small. But even with these headwinds, reporters are doing ace work. Judging by the long list of Bob Mueller's questions for Trump, which we recently leaked to the New York Times, by the Trump administration, by the way, that was Jay Sekulo's questions, journalists are on the scent, and they have the goods. Remember, we were talking about, who was it, Evan Peterson? Or Davidson? A couple of weeks ago about the fact that this is the beginning of the end. All the reporters kind of know that this is a huge scandal.
Yes.
It's just that we can't really, tell you about that because we know more than we can write because we haven't verified it and gone through our editors and yada, yada, yada. But he's guilty.
Okay. All right. Good. What time is it?
So here's a good rule of thumb for making sense of Trump and his myriad scandals. The simplest explanations are the best ones. Trump is the embodiment of Occam's razor. If it's rumored to have happened, it probably did. Now you go back and think about the P-tape. Now you go back and think about the fact that maybe Trump really was the father of that abortion situation that got paid $1.2 million.
1.6.
Opt for the most obvious explanation, not the most convoluted one. If you were in Las Vegas and can win $1 million by placing a simple bet, you know how you'd bet. Because no politician in either party deserves the benefit of the doubt, especially not Trump. Giuliani served up this truth on a silver platter. Of course Trump paid hush money to a porn star for her silence. They met at a golf course. Is there a world where this didn't happen?
No.
Right? So when Mike Pence says, well, it's time to pull this, Robert Mueller thing to a close because why? We're talking about the fact that Trump is likely guilty of money laundering and organized crime. We're talking about the fact that Trump is likely guilty of collusion or conspiracy. We're likely, because conspiracy, I guess, is the crime and collusion is the way we describe it in the press. And we're talking about the fact that he's probably guilty of obstruction of justice. And why in the world would we assume none of that is true? Assume it is true and read the stories that way. And they really take a different light. And you can say, well, that's because you're a partisan. Just because you're a partisan doesn't mean you're wrong.
That's true. And I'm reminded by one of the video clips circulating on Twitter today. It was huge and print-worthy news every hour of every day for a decade when it was the Clintons and, quote, even the appearance of impropriety. And, is it true? Can we really prove it? I don't know. You never stopped printing it when it was the appearance of impropriety, and it's certainly the appearance of impropriety now, plus Rudy Giuliani saying, oh, yeah, it was impropriety, you bet. And there's going to be more. Okay.
So Peter Hamby brings us back to the John Edwards situation.
Yes, that guy.
Right? So there was a story that popped the National Enquirer after a campaign event in South Carolina, and Edwards did what politicians under siege always do. He lies. The story about me having a child with somebody else is false. It's completely untrue. It's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Edwards called the story made up, and in those pre-Twitter times, that was good enough, and the established media stopped looking. Oh. The mainstream political press, he writes, moved on to the sexier Obama-Clinton primary fight. Didn't chase the Edwards story again until the following year, when he was being discussed as a potential vice presidential pick for Obama. In hindsight, this reporter Johnson, who's now an executive producer at MSNBC, remembered how wild it was that the media didn't go after the story. When you're in it, it's hard to fathom how big it is, she said. In a campaign, so much of the political appetite is just being digested in bits and pieces. And once the media decided to cover it, the scandal broke open. And here's the interesting part. It was revealed as something even more sinister than the affair.
Hmm. Oh, well, yes.
Edwards had a love child with a woman named Hunter, was accused of orchestrating hush money payments using cash from a wealthy donor named Bunny.
Funny.
And even allegedly concocted a scheme to have a political aide pretend he was the father.
Oh, my.
So when you think about what's going on with these accusations against Brody and maybe Trump really was the father, go back to this one and say, it's not so crazy. It's happened.
Yeah. And, well, I guess the crazy part is like, wow, that didn't work. I should try it. I don't know how that ever occurred to her.
I got Michael Cohen.
Okay. Well, there's more to come in 2 minutes after our short break for you to catch your breath. Amazing. I'm having a heart attack. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin is still with us. We're still talking about, any number of things. Donald Trump, Elliot Broidy covering for him, draining the swamp, not draining the swamp, Michael Cohen taking cash payments for nothing in particular, but drawing the lesson from the Vanity Fair article, from the object lesson of the John Edwards saga. Peter Hamby providing us with lessons from recent history. There's more.
Well, the part of the thing. Let's just end it. It's a great piece, and he ends it on a positive note. He says the story is instructive because John Edwards, was at the end of the day a conventional politician with a conventional political team, and he was a liar.
Yeah.
So compare him to Trump, the least conventional politician who's been caught in so many lies and misleading statements that the Washington Post has decided to keep a tally, and it's got more than 3,000.
That's a lot.
Politicians rarely deserve the benefit of the doubt, even the good ones, on policy matters and personal ones. And if it's true of Edwards or Weiner or Clinton or Nixon or any other politician who has lied to our faces only to end up crossways with the law and the American public, it's absolutely true of Trump.
Yes.
And it's an interesting thing because I was having this debate with some conservatives on Twitter yesterday, and you bring up something like Michael Cohen. Oh, yeah, well, what about when Clinton did this? And it's like, can you just give up the whataboutism?
Yeah.
Don't you understand that this is like an order of magnitude different? No, I don't, because I won't, because I don't want to.
Yeah. I am not certain where that comes from, or like, I mean,
well, you can't defend it, so you have to change the topic.
I guess that's it.
And when you tell them that, they sort of back off a little bit.
Yeah, I guess
Nobody's
so.
saying that Bill Clinton never lied. Nobody's saying Obama never lied. That's not the point. They're conventional politicians who normally, Clinton way more than Obama, did it in a way that was, a bit outside the norm. Obama was totally within the norm of what a politician does or says. Mm-hmm. And the best examples, which are not particularly relevant, but the best examples they could bring up is somebody like Ben Rhodes, who said that, we got everybody together in a room and we wanted to really push the story about how Iran was being a good egg, when we got the Iran deal done. What he was really saying is that we got all these experts and we wanted to make sure that their story, their opinion, the expert opinion, was all lined up and clear to the public. Okay? Mm-hmm. What is that? It's an admission that public relations are done when you're trying to sell policy.
Yeah.
BFD.
Right.
And compare that to, let's say, George W. Bush, who told Karl Rove told Ron Suskind, we make our own reality. You guys keep chasing the truth and we keep making, the reality. And that's going to be the way it works from this point onward. Uh-huh. And he was right about a lot of that. But again, order of magnitude different than what Ben Rhodes did. What Trump is doing is an order of magnitude different than what Karl Rove was talking about.
Yes.
And so if you don't have that perspective and can't understand that, it's really going to be very difficult to have a conversation about it. So Hamby ends by saying the national media was too pompous to jump in the mud pit with the Inquirer a decade ago, too slow to realize how its place in the world was eroding and how easily it could be exploited by bad actors. But he says they're getting better, and so maybe that's a good thing.
Well, I hope so. It would be good if they got better.
Well, look, all this stuff is out. You read it in the New York Times and the Washington Post. You're reading about these scandals. They're not ignoring them. I'm not
snooping on anybody's, alleyways and garbage cans and getting this news myself. There is that. As much as we as much as we criticize the media when they do dumb stuff, there's also some stuff they're uncovering which is, useful. I can't. Sometimes you get frustrated. Well, why don't you just say what's happening here? And the answer is, 'cause we'll get sued and I'll lose my job. I gotcha. That makes some sense.
Yeah, see Gawker. I mean, there are people with big pockets out there who are trying to do this. And then let me just throw in one other story here, also from Vanity Fair. This is Tina Guyen. And it's called There's a Lot of Shadiness Around Avenatti. MAGA World is not quite coming to terms with Stormy Lawyer's latest bombshell. It's kind of interesting in terms of how it's being taken. I don't watch Fox News very much, so I can't report to you on how Fox and Friends are doing. And that's usually the best way to tell. Okay. But at this point in the arrest investigation, Trump's allies in the conservative media are expressing a rather creative interpretation of events. Mm-hmm. Right? Trump just calls it fake news.
Right.
They tend to ignore this story. Like if Avenatti has a big bombshell, then they'll have something to do with Clinton and the Russia One investigation, and they pull up these 10-year-old stories, right. Or look at car chases. That was a famous one that Hannity did. He couldn't talk about what was going on. It looked bad, so he went to a car chase somewhere.
Okay.
Right?
Was he
But what they're doing now is they're bringing up a lot of stuff about Avenatti. Oh, he's terrible. He's awful. He's just in for himself. Look, now he's getting pulled into court because he put out all these documents that are, by the way, turning to be true. How did he get them? They're bank records. He's not entitled to them. He should go to court to explain that. It's the old classic, oh, well, the leak showed that we were incredibly shady. Let's go after the leaker.
Yeah, which Avenatti is not.
No, he's the recipient.
Yeah, he totally.
But we've seen this play before. This is how they went after the Washington Post and the New York Times over the Pentagon Papers.
Yes, and how they went after the New York Times and Washington Post over whatever the hell it was. Actually, during the Obama administration as well. Who were your sources? They can't can't find the leaker, so they lean on the outlet.
Right. Let's see. So Viktor Vekselberg is the Russian oligarch and billionaire that we were talking about without mentioning his name in the previous segment.
Have American cousin.
Yeah, he has an American cousin, and therefore it's American-owned, so you guys don't even know what you're talking about. It's got nothing to do with Russia.
Yes. Just sounds Russian.
Right. So, the dossier obviously is fake. All the connections you're trying to make with Michael Cohen aren't real. And basically that's how they're playing it, and that's how they're trying to ignore what's going on here. Oh, plus change the topic and talk about something else like North Korea.
Oh, yeah, sure, great. Okay, let's do that.
Well, let me throw in a couple of things. I just want to make sure I get these in before I have to leave. Here's a CBS News story from today. Signs China tariffs are starting to hurt U.S. businesses and wallets. And he's talking about, in this particular article, Chinese importers cutting pork orders.
Oh, no, pork.
Boneless hams in cold storage at a record 86 million pounds earlier this year.
I love that.
Did you know? I mean, this is the kind of thing, if you're in Chicago and you're on the commodities market, you want to follow pork bellies, right?
Right. This is what I like that. What is it? Boneless hams and
cold storage.
All right. Cold hams and every good thing.
Right. China's going out of their way to avoid direct soybean purchases from the U.S. I mean, these are all things that are going to impact red states. It's really kind of the point here.
All right. And red meats.
And what about tariffs? They're going to help aluminum. Complicating matters in U.S. aluminum markets are sanctions imposed on Russia that sent the metal soaring to 6-year highs and unleashed the widest swings in prices since 1997, which left shipments from Russian aluminum company Rusal sitting unopened in U.S. ports. And Rusal is the world's second biggest aluminum company in metric tons behind China. They have a different company. And U.S.'s Alcoa is sixth. And so that's just roiling the price that everybody pays, and therefore winds up affecting U.S. Goods as well. So it's just an example of like what Trump does and the entire Trump administration does is do things and then don't think through what they do, and then you have these unexpected consequences, and then it's the nobody could have anticipated. Here's a thread by J.B. Wolfstahl.
What's you saying?
In 1994, the U.S. negotiated a nuclear agreement with North Korea known as the Agreed Framework.
It's a good name.
1994. Okay. Under the deal, North Korea was to end their nuclear weapons program in exchange for heavy fuel oil to energy-producing nuclear reactors paid for by South Korea, and diplomatic normalization. The total cost was cheap, $2 billion, mostly paid for by the South. And then in 2002, the Bush administration was upset the deal appeased North Korea, a terrorist state with a horrific human rights record, and was convinced North Korea was cheating, so Bush pulled out of the deal, and John Bolton was the chief State Department official and cheerleader for regime change. Bolton and company were convinced they could bring enough global pressure to bear on Pyongyang that it would be forced to stop both nuclear and other dangerous activities. They were wrong.
Oh, no.
They were wrong then. They're probably wrong now. But the point is that we're where we are today because they did that then. They ignored the fact that Bush's global reputation was toxic and countries were not interested in supporting U.S. policies. Does this sound familiar?
Yes.
Defense Secretary Rumsfeld had denigrated old Europe, including our closest allies, the UK, France, and Germany, and once freed of constraints and inspections, and in the face of a U.S. seen as hostile and irrational, produced large amounts of nuclear materials and tested its first nuclear weapon in 2006. And since then, North Korea has been off to the atomic races. Okay?
So it's not working.
So Bolton believes that
Yes.
Iraq, or he believed that Iraq would show Iran, North Korea, and others that America was back, tough, and not to be messed with, and they would stop their nuclear and other efforts. So we wound up raiding Iraq. And what happened? Colossal failure. The Bush administration was incompetent, staffed mainly by ideologues loyal to Vice President Cheney. Bush rejected IAEA conclusion that Iraq's nuclear weapons program was dead. Bush was wrong. They were right. They failed to adequately prepare for what came after inspectors were kicked out, Iraq invaded, and alienated the allies we needed to support us. Does this sound familiar?
I recall vaguely.
It's the same people. It's John Bolton and his crew. It's the same people doing it now.
If only there were a process, constitutional process, by which we could have blocked their participation in government going forward.
Trump now violating the JCPOA, a deal that was working, and the IAEA was effectively verifying. Bolton has encouraged and called for this move. There's no hope U.S. will garner broad global support for a get-tough approach. Our allies are willing to work to add on to the deal. We did not take yes for an answer. America is now blamed for the demise of the agreement. We alienated our allies. We're now threatening them with sanctions. The EU is preparing blocking legislation that will protect their companies and isolate the U.S. Iran is now freed from nuclear constraints. They can turn the nuclear dial up at a time of their choosing, and will likely end up with a nuclear Iran or will be forced to take military action to damage the nuclear capability. And this all falls on the feet of Trump, Bolton, and the group that undermined and misled the public on this agreement, falsely claiming it allowed Iran to build nuclear weapons, could not be verified, that Iran was able to keep IAEA out of military sites, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Remember, we were just talking about in terms of the press being properly skeptical of people in power, especially when it comes to policy. So this is, highly important that we don't lose track of that. So he ends by saying, if they can produce a better deal, I'll applaud, but I doubt they can. They've supported an administration that can't think or shoot straight. We're all going to suffer for this decision. End. So yes. The incompetence and the lying has major consequences. It isn't just a question of Michael Cohen and pointing fingers and then saying, okay, well, this is eventually going to lead to indictments for him and, criminal investigations of the rest of the Trump administration. It also has major implications for world peace, the sorts of things that you kind of think of are important. And therefore, when Donald Trump gets mentioned as, oh, he should win the Nobel Peace Prize, you have to scratch your head and say, you guys are insane.
Dumber prizes have been awarded, though rarely to dumber people. That's true. It's interesting what that thread ends on, where he says, if they can produce a better deal, I'll applaud, but I doubt that they can. That meshes with a lot of speculation, including my own, that what ends up happening in Korea and likely in Iran as well is that a new deal is reached that is substantially no different at all from the old deal, but Donald Trump will just, of course, it doesn't take any imagination to think of him just getting out there and saying, oh, it's totally different and so much better, even though there's no difference. The only thing being he was president when it happened. I was going to say he did it, but he didn't even do that.
Yeah, you did the same thing I did. You just did this with your hands. That's all.
Right. Yeah, that's basically it. I pursed my lips and forced the words out over my ridiculous dentures.
Right. Well, that's the big difference. So I'm going to go, but I'm going to leave you with this George Will column because it's fun.
No, you're going to leave it with me? All right. Yeah. George is not going to be happy about that.
George is okay with it. He put it out there. He said you could take it.
All right.
Here's the title. Trump is no longer the worst person in government.
Oh. All right.
You know who is?
No idea.
Donald Trump with his feral cunning knew.
His what?
The oleaginous Mike Pence, with his talent for toadyism and appetite for obsequiousness, could, Trump knew, become America's most repulsive public figure. And Pence, who has reached this pinnacle by dethroning his benefactor, is augmenting the public stock of useful knowledge because his is the authentic voice of today's lick-spittle Republican Party. He clarifies this year's elections. Vote Republican to ratify groveling as governing.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes. A little almost Dennis Miller-esque in the beginning there, but back to George Will.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's all true.
Right. So he ends by saying, with a long litany of everything that's bad about Pence, which is why it's long, it is said that one cannot blame people who applaud Arpaio and support his rehabilitators, Trump, Pence, et al., because, well, globalization or healthcare costs or something. Actually, one must either blame them or condescend to them as lacking moral agency. Republicans silent about Pence have no such excuse. There will be negligible legislating by the next Congress. The ballots cast this November will be most important as validations or repudiations of the harmonizing voices of Trump, Pence, Arpaio, and the like. Trump is what he is, a floundering, inarticulate jumble of gnawing insecurities and not at all compensating vanities, which is pathetic. Pence is what he's chosen to be, which is horrifying. So he's got a point.
Yes, he does. So congratulations, George.
Well, but he's pretty much set up the entire idea of what are we voting for. Democrats don't stand for anything. Well, actually, they do.
Well, I'm going to be crisscrossing the country talking to Trump and Pence supporters in their bars and diners about how closely they're reading George Will.
Bye-bye.
Always important.
Yeah, it'll be important for that. I think he's a huge influence on them over their breakfasts and beers.
Mm. So Lynn Vavreck, my last piece that I'm going to leave you with here.
Oh, all right.
Political scientist, I like her. She's writing for The Upshot today. And she highlights something that I've always said, and therefore it must be a brilliant thing.
That's how we know.
That's how we know. It's called Unable to Excite the Base. Moderate candidates still tend to outdo extreme ones. Do you know why? An analysis of more than 30 years of House general elections suggests don't nominate somebody who will motivate the other side.
Oh.
Don't poke him in the eye with a stick. You don't win that way.
The Republicans certainly don't. I don't know if I have.
Well,
their
extremists tend to lose. I mean, we just saw that on Tuesday.
I'm trying to think. Oh well, maybe it's true of both. But maybe the problem is that we just don't ordinarily.
We don't ordinarily pick them. No, didn't do so well. The Republicans, on occasion, will nominate a Todd Aiken or a Murdoch or a Christine O'Donnell or a Sarah Palin. Even.
Yeah.
And when that happens, they don't do well generally. Trump is a one-off. And again, you can't make definitive statements about Trump won in 2016, therefore X, Y, or Z. You got to do it in context. It was an extremely narrow win that was fueled by Comey and a whole bunch of other stuff going on, garbage coverage by the press about Clinton's health and so on and so forth. Everything mattered because it was such a close election. And the entire election was decided in 3 states with, less than 70,000 votes. So, Trump proves that, no, it doesn't prove anything, actually.
That is true. Always want to keep the stupid Electoral College in mind, and also, based on some interesting tweets from yesterday, the mysterious appearance of $50 million in bankrupt Trump's hands to self-fund the race. Okay.
So she points out, Lynn Vavreck does, Donald Trump's rise to the GOP nomination and eventual presidential victory gave heft to the idea that extreme candidates can beat moderates by galvanizing their party's base. And the premise is shaping competitive races in both parties, but an analysis of more than 30 years of House general elections suggests the opposite. It seems that when parties nominate an extreme candidate in a district where a more moderate candidate might have had a chance to win, the extreme candidate does worse. Duh.
Okay. Yes.
Extreme candidates fire up voters, but not always in the way the candidates would like. That's why, be careful what you wish for. No, actually, we really did wish we were running against Don Blankenship. We really wish we were running against Joe Arpaio. That would be a race we'd be more than happy to take on. Yeah, but 2016, forget about 2016. You're traumatized. That's not how it works.
There's no electoral college in these House races. It's straight popular vote, and straight popular vote. The answer is the same too. Right? Yeah. So by the straight popular vote, Donald Trump lost. He's a loser. It's a losing proposition. Extreme candidates, researchers say, may mobilize their party's base, but they tend to activate their opponent's base even more than their own, resulting in a net loss on turnout. They also seem to lose habitual voters, people who almost always turn out to vote, to the opposition party, while moderate nominees hold on. In this way, extreme nominees lose voters in 2 ways, mobilization and persuasion. They don't bring out the people who are on their side as much as they bring out the people who hate them. And they don't persuade the persuadable, and they lose them, and then they wind up losing elections. And that's why when people tell me, well, forget about persuading anybody, just go and get your own base, all you have to do is do that and you win, I generally say that's really a dumb idea. It's not that our base isn't important. We don't want to abandon them. But you can't win with just your base. You can't. When it was
in
arguable, and when it was arguable that it was happening, it was because it's not the same thing to say motivate the base in 1998 or 2008 as it is to say it now. Motivating the base for Republicans then was, despite whatever problems, tax cuts, fiscal prudence, etc., heartland values, that was all garbage, but it was something that they could point to and, have some cover in clinging to. And of course now, even if you were to preach the same topics to the base, everyone would laugh in your face. But
my favorite one is we got a primary Joe Manchin.
Oh, well,
why?
I see.
Well, we'll bring out more Democrats if we do that, and then you'll lose.
It's certainly possible. Of course, I guess then the analysis you'd want to go through as well is the primary opponent moderate or extremist, whatever that's supposed to mean. And I guess, I guess to the punditry, to the press, to establishment operatives, they would say, well, a challenger to an incumbent is by definition an extremist. This is kind of how they're operating, and maybe for purposes of this calculation, that's even true. I don't know.
But you can have good, solid left of center, center left candidates who aren't extremists. You
can. It's just that the notion of challenging an incumbent strikes people as extremist in itself.
Well, to a certain extent, that's true.
Yeah, it's
because why are you doing it?
Sad, but true.
Chances are the incumbent has the best chance of winning.
That's still true. That doesn't comfort a lot of people, but then they get all extreme about it when you argue with them.
Well, then they say, well, we're not trying to win. And then you go, okay, then we're having a different conversation.
That's true, too. And you say, all right, well, I mean, that's a noble idea.
If all you care about is winning, if all we care about is winning, then you don't win. Then you wind up with a Supreme Court that's even worse than it is right now. So I don't know what you're talking about.
There is that.
Anyway. That's my point of view from the center here. And, of course, being a center-left person, more on left than center, I consider myself the center, and everybody else is judged based on where I am.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the right way to look at politics?
Apparently. I mean,
I like it.
It's comfortable, certainly, and, you're not wrong so long as you're also everybody else.
For example, everybody else speaks with an accent except me.
Right. I think. I don't know. This may be the way
you're not a good example. You're from New Jersey.
I speak with all the accents I can in a single day.
Yeah, exactly right. And with that, I'll just pass on the rest of those observations. This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman, Kagro in the morning. There's a lot of scandal out there, and guess what? Word to the wise, bet on it being true. Take care, and I'll talk to you on Monday.
All right. Thanks very much. Hope we can survive this weekend as well. Thanks, Greg. Lots to bat clean up with. I had mentioned that there was speculation out there that, last thing I left off on was the speculation on what Trump might do with a North Korea or even Iran deal and whether he would just come back with something largely the same. That's what my speculation was yesterday. And I see Max Boot speculating the same today, and that's valuable because, come on, the guy's name is Max Boot. How do you argue with a guy named Max Boot about foreign policy and possibly war? I couldn't come up with a more amazingly ridiculous name, plus the hat, the pen and ink rendering. It's obviously very serious top to bottom, but that's what he tweets. Trump has pulled out of, and I'm talking about public policy here, TPP, just kidding, TPP, Paris Climate Accord, Iran nuclear deal. But the world's greatest deal maker has successfully negotiated exactly one deal in this year he's been in office, and that's with South Korea. And the differences between the old agreement and the new one are minimal. This is Max Boot selling his own post-opinion piece, which is herein linked under the photo of Donald Trump very ludicrously, as usual, holding up some dumb thing that he has signed. I do not know where he got the idea that was worth doing, but it's now a trademark thing for him. And he puts it this way: it's put up or shut up time for President Trump. Good effing luck getting him to acknowledge that, and either putting up or shutting up. Neither one is going to happen. It's that time, but so what? He's been acting like an arsonist toward America's international obligations. So far, he's exited the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which not everybody is that upset about, the Paris Climate Accord, which most people are upset about, and now the Iran nuclear deal, while launching renegotiations of NAFTA, the U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, KORUS, Korea, K-O-R-U-S, and bad-mouthing NATO and the World Trade Organization. According to Trump, the Iran deal is, quote, a horrible, one-sided deal that should never, ever have been made. NAFTA is the worst trade deal ever made. Paris Accord was a disaster for this country. TPP was a very bad deal for the United States. Does this guy have a vocabulary? You couldn't convince me of it. Chorus was an unacceptable, horrible deal and a job killer. I've heard that one before. World Trade Organization is unfair to the U.S. and NATO is not fair to the people and taxpayers of the United States. How will this make America safer, stronger, make things fairer? This will make America stronger, safer, and lots of things fairer. Believe me. That's the answer. While denigrating existing accords, he has vowed to negotiate new ones that will simply be stupendous. In saying sayonara to the TPP, I don't think that's a nice thing to say. He said, I like bilateral, because he does not understand the big vocabulary words. I like bilateral. I think it's better for our country. And I much would prefer a bilateral deal directly with Japan. In declaring au revoir to the Paris Accord, okay, equal treatment there, he said that something could happen, and if it happens, that'll be wonderful. What a terrific policy direction he's giving us there. In bidding, oh my goodness, to, I guess, goodbye in what, Persian? What, is that what we're speaking? Koda Hafez. Thanks for throwing that in there, Max. To the Iranian nuclear accord. On Tuesday, he vowed, we will find a real, comprehensive, and lasting solution to the Iranian nuclear threat. All this is in keeping with Trump's boasts that he's the world's greatest deal maker. As he tweeted in 2014, deals are my art form. Other people paint beautifully or write poetry. I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks. We have learned since from Stormy Daniels that that's not how, but we'll talk about that after this break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just a short 1-minute break here before we dive back in. We'll take a look at all the fun stuff in the comments section here. Never read the comments? Well, try to remember to read the comments on this show. The Warlock has a few of them for us. Let's see. There is, in reverse chronological order, Stormy has confirmed that Trump does indeed like bilateral. I am not so certain that that is the case. I believe he was trying to establish at least a trilateral commission at one point. It's just that it didn't work out with the other parties. But bilateral is the best that they can get. Let's see. Oh, by the way, here's another good critique from Don Enrique, who tweets as H.E. Cross, who says, the show's fantastic. The only nitpick is that your Trump voice is horrendous, which is amazing because you want to hold it up now. I mean, I don't really believe that it's particularly that good. It's just fun to do. Now, is it horrendous? Like it's horrible to hear that voice? That I could believe. But I was never really sure. It never really sounded in my head like it was a particularly good impression, but I guess I could hold it up to next to the other tweets that are like, oh my God, it's like Donald Trump is on your show. Please stop it. That could be. But anyway, okay. It's too bad. I like to differentiate things. I think it makes things sound dumber, and that's fun for me. And there has to be some fun involved in the show for me, or I just can't do it. Let's see. Other news. Bill telling us that George Will's thesaurus got drunk and jumped off a bridge. Film at 11. That I believe. And but more from the Warlock as well. Let's see. There are two comments here that are, I think standard objections from the left to a lot of a lot of the things that we point to as horrific in the Trump administration, including, yes, the Clinton Foundation stuff is all true, like the Occam's razor applied there too, and it may very well be. Of course, it was an interesting, like I said, juxtaposition to see tweeted around today all of the accusations about, oh my God, what about the appearance of impropriety in the Clinton Foundation? Okay, let us compare the two, I suppose. Is there an appearance of impropriety here? Yeah. Was there unrelenting focus on it day in and day out, and did it convince the political press not to give credence to anything Clinton said and to say that she had a credibility problem, a relatability problem, a making an enemy of the press problem? Yes. Now, are there people among the press saying the same about Trump? Yes. Is it universal with respect to Trump? No. No, it isn't. Now, is that the fault of the media? Now, that's an interesting question, because there is still a major actor involved, Fox News, which will have its own political and pecuniary interest in not joining in that chorus in an act of, overt dishonesty. Whereas it was easy to get unanimity across the board among the major players in the press when the target was Hillary Clinton. And that's not because she perhaps, I guess we can't say it's because she didn't deserve not to get the benefit of the doubt, if we're reading Peter Hanby correctly, but that it looks different. I mean, that's one argument we could make. It just looks different because there was press and unanimity on that subject because Fox was invested in that position. Whereas, I mean, I'm sure there are people who would argue, well, the others are invested in that position too. But there are others who would argue, well, they arrived at that position through, I guess you would have to then argue, through no fault of their own. It was just straight cynicism and skepticism about the motivation of politicians, and that's where media organizations ought to land. But did they think at that point? I guess here's the better question: is there an example you can point to consistently of the major media outlets saying, in order to be fair here, we must give occasionally, at least, prominent voice to those who deny that there is an appearance of impropriety, who will carry the Clinton message forward, and we gotta have both, in the same way that we see it with the Trump administration, I guess. How about that? We gotta, I think we ought to perhaps think about that as a possibility. And then, of course, the other observation Warlock made. So if Obama lied, that's fine too. To some extent, yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know whether you're reacting here, and this is the problem with not being able to respond to these things in real time. But is it a reaction to perhaps Greg putting out there that there are politicians who lie within the bounds of what normal politicians normally lie about, and then there is a quantum difference when it comes to people who lie about, sometimes situations of their own making, which are well outside of normal behavior, paying for the abortions of mistresses, let's say, versus we really want to have our ducks in a row on this issue of international public policy. And I think that there's a quantum difference there. There's also a number of things about which I think Obama either, I don't know, what do I think he lied about versus what do I think he misled about versus what do I think he adopted the wrong position on. There's certainly areas of disagreement. There's certainly areas where I think that's not really the truth, and it's upsetting that you're not telling the truth. And I know that the truth is other than what you're telling us, and sometimes that happened on, say, detainee policy or war-fighting policies or cleaning up the messes of the previous administration on those same policies, where I was like, that's not true, and I don't like it that you're not saying it's true. And I think there's a certain amount of tolerance for lying within the bounds of public policy coverage or places where it's just, look, there's no logical explanation for how we arrive at this juncture, but it's a public policy juncture, as opposed to I'm, thieving money off of Russians, or I didn't actually pay for my campaign. stolen Russian money did, or whatever else. Yeah, I see a quantum difference in there. Let's see. Michael Musson, of course, observing from the beginning of the show. Naturally, Novartis will say that Cohen couldn't deliver. Interesting. Because otherwise they're headed towards bribery territory. Either that or they're headed towards, well, what Lachlan Markay and Asawin, Subsang and Sam Stein, Sueb Sang. I'm going to go with Subsang there on that one. I'm sorry I mangle your name so badly. Over in the Daily Beast, but before I launch into that article, let's see. One, yes, I'll answer yes to Armando, who asks, do I want 5 minutes on Kagro being right? I certainly do. Although now it has morphed into 15 minutes. So yes, let's say yes to that. Let's hold off for just a second and let me do the Daily Beast article here, and then a few items of lightning roundup, and then we'll get to me being right for once about something. What's going on with the Novartis deal and others? This is this might be right. It might just be topical insight into how we can get to a different answer that is right, playing off of what happens here in the Daily Beast piece. To cash in on Trump's presidency, Michael Cohen sold clients on secrecy and access. He never registered as a federal lobbyist. He made more than they did. Very largely true. In the winter of 2017, the pharmaceutical giant Novartis made a strategic investment. That's how they would describe it, I'm sure. It paid Donald Trump's longtime employee, maybe, Michael Cohen, a rate of $100,000 a month over the course of a year to, in its words, advise the company as to how the Trump administration might approach certain U.S. healthcare policy matters, including the Affordable Care Act. And by the way, that makes better sense of the $1.2 million figure. $100,000 a month. I mean, that number doesn't make any sense in the real world, but at least it's a nice round thing. And it also calls into question the $130,000 thing for Stormy Daniels. But though that's not exactly another story, it's another angle, which we'll leave for another day. But Novartis and other companies that enlisted Cohen services, Cohen's LLC, Essential Consultants, also provided another benefit, total opacity and anonymity, except it didn't. I would have to add to that. Through the LLC, the pharmaceutical company could try to shape or at least predict federal policy without ever having to disclose the work or the sums paid to carry it out. True, good point, although again, I just pause for a second to say, Novartis doesn't have any real reason to care about whether or not anyone finds out that they're spending money of any amount to try to shape or predict federal policy. There's no reason why they would feel it would be necessary not to disclose the money that they spend on that. Indeed, they would be seeking to deduct it from their income taxes later on if they were paying it to a legitimate lobbyist who could try and shape or predict federal policy. The reason they needed to they wanted to not disclose the work or the sums involved with Michael Cohen is that they knew they weren't getting anything like an attempt to shape or predict federal policy from Michael Cohen, and that they were paying far above any market rate for a successful lobbyist to do that. This was a bribe, and that's why they wanted it quiet. Fortune 500 companies are risk averse, says a top GOP lobbyist. The structure helped them hide the risk. That's putting too much window dressing on it, in my opinion. Novartis now claims that the arrangement was a bust, as it quickly became apparent that Essential Consultants, in the company's words, Novartis' words, would be unable to provide the services that Novartis had anticipated related to the U.S. healthcare policy matters. Nevertheless, the arrangement, now that it's been made public, is yet another quagmire for Cohen, who already finds himself dealing with probes into the Trump campaign's potential collusion with Russia, and the payoffs made from the same LLC to a porn star alleging an affair with the president. The opacity of the arrangement is the heart of the issue. Ethicists say that the advocacy practiced by President Trump's longtime right-hand man and fixer speaks to a phenomenon that good government groups call shadow lobbying. It's the practice of influencing policy and policymakers through activity informal enough to fall short of the legal definition of lobbying. An army of consultants, government relations executives, and political intelligence professionals earn tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars each year through such soft advocacy, and none of its activities are disclosed to the public. Pausing for a second here to add more commentary, and I hope some more insight to this. True, shadow lobbying is real, and opacity is valued, but it is typically valued, I think, in my understanding, by the recipients of the payments, not by the makers of the payments. There is nothing wrong, and in fact, you're much better served legally with paying lobbyists who are registered lobbyists, sums that are open, obvious, and transparent to do your business. It's much better for the company, and it's much better for the lobbyists. Where shadow lobbying really ends up making sense and where most of it is being practiced is among either former administration officials or former members of Congress or aspiring elective politicians, electoral politicians, people who are running for office or getting ready to run for office, who don't want to be labeled lobbyists, who don't want it to be accurate to label them a lobbyist in debate or during the campaign or campaign commercials. For instance, you get, a good example of this sort of thing would be somebody in the position of, say, Rick Santorum, still dreaming about running for president. Needs an income, needs a lot of that income, wants to get it, knows he can shake down the lobbying outfits for any number of corporate entities and social, policy warriors from the other side, but he doesn't want to be labeled a lobbyist, and so instead he's giving political intelligence to these groups. Or sometimes it's just, what I need is $1 million for me to be able to afford the lifestyle of jetting around the country, giving speeches to places, speaking to arch conservative groups, appearing on television. And when I appear on television, I got to have my hair cut just so. I got to have suits that fit right. I need to have car service between my house and studios. I need to continue to have meetings with arch conservative jackasses so that they continue to pump me full of whatever. I need garbage to say during these appearances, and I'm kind of a dumb guy, and I need that from you. So you'll pay me for political intelligence and whatever else, and say I'm not lobbying because I don't want to have to stand up there and deny I'm a lobbyist. If I'm a registered lobbyist, everything's on the up and up, but then people can point to it and say, if you say you're not a lobbyist, why did you register as a lobbyist? That, I think, is the chief benefit of shadow lobbying. In other words, it's for the purposes of paying off people who are about to become politicians later in ways that doesn't leave them subject to charges of bribery and doesn't leave them subject to charges worse of being a lobbyist. But I don't know if that gets discussed in here. Back to the article here. If it is accurate that Cohen touted his sway over Trump and offered to influence the Trump administration on matters that affect the business interests of Novartis, and these companies in turn made payments to Cohen for such services, that crosses the line. And it does. It crosses the line. But it crosses the line into lobbying. So that's the bad news. It's crossing the line into something, really super awful here. No, it crosses the line into bribery is where I think most people thought that sentence was going, but apparently not. Okay, well, that's kind of a shock. Anyway, that according to Craig Holman, government affairs lobbyist for the group Public Citizen, who should, be willing to speak out more strongly about that. Since Cohen is not a registered lobbyist and has not disclosed the payment for services, he would likely be in violation of LDA. I don't remember what that actually stands for, but Lobbying Disclosure Act, I guess, if the payments came from domestic sources, or in violation of FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act, if the payments came from foreign sources, which at least some of them did. For months into the Trump era, Cohen had talked with friends and associates about his plans and opportunities to, quote, cash in, as one Trump World associate described, on his intimate connections to and knowledge of the now most powerful person in the world, his former Trump Organization boss. It was long an open secret in pro-Trump political circles that Cohen was one of many Trump-aligned figures who was knee-deep in quartering wealthy people based on his reputation and his purported access to the president. He never registered as a federal lobbyist. He made more than they did. During all of 2017, Novartis' formal payments to outside lobbying firms averaged it says $12,000 a month, less than 1/8 in total of what they paid Cohen for the better part of a year, in which the company says he did exactly zero work. Another Cohen client, AT&T, reportedly paid Essential Consulting LLC up to $600,000 for, quote, actual work done, unquote. They needed to say that for the legal purposes. According to CNBC, that arrangement, too, was hidden from public view. AT&T did pick up one lobbying firm in early 2017 with some Trump administration pull, Sexton's Creek, a firm run by Vice President Mike Pence's former chief of staff, but reported paying that firm just a fifth of what it paid Cohen. Cohen didn't return a request for comment, but how he managed to score big despite lacking any tangible D.C. experience or notable policy acumen is perhaps the clearest illustration of the koan that chaos is a ladder. In the weeks after Trump's surprise victory in the 2016 campaign, there was a corporate rush to get in the good graces of a president who few had expected to prevail. Everybody was scrambling. It said one GOP lobbyist, we need some sort of insider who knows the operation. It was a black box. Cohen was one of the main insiders, having worked for Trump for years prior to his presidential bid, but he was far from the only one benefiting from his connections to the president. And I guess we could check into all of those additional folks just before we check out of this article. Let's take a look at some of the names. A few firms with actual ties to the administration stood to benefit tremendously. Sexton's Creek was one. Others included Avenue Strategies, Ballard Partners. I guess these are names we'll call out for our rogues gallery, and if they pop up later, we'll know. American Continental Group, well, boring sounding. Jamestown Associates, and Nahigian Strategies. That's Nahigian. Nahigian. I don't know who that Nahigian is. Probably selling, I don't know. He's laundering money through Persian rugs. I have no idea. All of which had senior executives with ties to the Trump campaign or to Trump transition veterans. But while business has indeed been good for those firms, none of them scored lobbying contracts with the corporations that turned to Cohen. He was really hogging everything up. Here we are. We've never talked to either one of those companies. I guess Novartis and Columbia Nova or whatever. That, according to Keith Nahigian, whose brother Ken was the lead on the presidential transition team. So another brother team. Jamestown, which doesn't lobby, also said that it had never been contacted by any of those companies, according to Barney Keller, a partner with the company. I don't know why he's the one speaking out for them, but probably because he's a name that you do not recognize from Trump circles, and therefore doesn't light up any warning signs. All right. Well, anyway, I'm going to jump back out of that article for the moment and do a couple of other roundups before we we get our confidence back by talking to Armando about something that we were right about. But there's some other garbage, essentially, that we have to bring up and let everybody know about. One, it was the reporting of, I guess it was it Stat News that Greg mentioned, and I saw Christina Wilkie pulling out from the Stat News piece that Novartis told Stat News that Cohen came to them promising access not just to Trump, but also the circle around him. We were hiring him as a lobbyist, but of course he wasn't registered. It's one of those things that, like, when you're hiring a contractor, you want to make sure You find the records at the state or county office that says they're bonded so that in case something goes wrong, you can recover against them. You should check and see if the guy you're hiring as a lobbyist is registered as a lobbyist. And if he's not, don't hire him, or don't say you're hiring him as a lobbyist anyway. But the more important part was Novartis, even though after, as it says, with a first bad meeting with Cohen, Novartis kept paying him so as not to, quote, anger Trump, which is an amazing little bit to find out there. There is also the other bit of news ProPublica has uncovered. The Russian oligarch-linked firm that paid Michael Cohen was, coincidentally, also represented by Trump lawyer Mark Kasowitz. That's something that deserves a little bit of scrutiny, and I'm not certain that you could hide it behind coincidence, but there are a lot of lawyers in Manhattan, and you should probably be able to find another one. But they didn't, and that seems kind of weird. But now the more explosive piece of small-time news. Yeah, Armando, okay to call in now? Yeah, sure. You can join in for this last piece here that I think is fun. Oh, yeah, so the other company name was Columbus, not Columbia, but Columbus Nova. I have more news about them, too. Why don't I give that little bit of news and then the juicy thing that I've been holding out on here. Why did Columbus Nova, it is asked by Think Progress here, one of that would be the Russian oligarch owned or connected firm that paid Michael Cohen along with these other international giants like Novartis and AT&T. Hi, Armando. Hang on just a second. I want to hit one or two quick stories here. Columbus Nova, the oligarch-connected firm, also apparently, according to Casey Michael at Think Progress, up to some other activity besides paying off Michael Cohen, and that is registering websites aimed at alt-right white supremacists. That seems like sort of outside the scope for, I don't know what Columbus Nova does, actually. But it's not website development for white nationalists. So what are they doing? I thought that was sort of a yet unexplained, but certainly potentially explosive part of the overall story. They were...
No. They're in the real estate and white supremacy business.
I guess so. And there's two verticals. And, some of the people that buy real estate are white. And so fine. Columbus Nova claims it's never been owned by any foreign entity, but it was recently listed as a subsidiary of Renova, a Russian-based conglomerate run by sanctioned oligarch Viktor Vekselberg. So what were they doing? What sort of websites were they registering? Altright.co, like co.co, the way they use that in Great Britain, and I think, everywhere around the world now uses it, but altright.co, altrights.co, alternateright.rt.com, and altright.com, R-I-T-E, none of which are active and in use, but I guess that just, and so that doesn't mean that they spent an incredible amount of money on it, probably next to nothing, but the big looming question, what in the effing hell would they do that for? And the answer, probably not benign. We'll say that. Okay, let's see. Also out there in terms of additional juicy stuff, let's see. The Wall Street Journal has this one, and of course I can't read the Wall Street Journal, but here's your headline. Erica Orden, presumably, once I open the actual view, even though it won't let me read the article, that will be the case. Erica Orden, Joe Palazzolo, and Julia Bykowitz. Trump lawyer, which one? Michael Cohen. Trump lawyer helped recruit corporate client with ties to Kushner probe. U.S. Immigration Fund, LLC. See, that's all it takes is just start another LLC. U.S. Immigration Fund, LLC, which supplied Chinese investors to Kushner companies. You remember the people who paid, they invest $500,000 in the Jersey City building, and in exchange they get a green card.
Yeah, it was Kushner's sister spearheaded that.
U.S. Immigration Fund, LLC, which supplied Chinese investors to Kushner companies, is among the clients that Michael Cohen delivered to Squire Patton Boggs. Now we're getting a fuller picture of what was going on over there, because that was still an unanswered question. As a matter of fact, though, Armando, we're coming up on the break, so we'll start our conversation on the other side of the break. But just to tease and excite all the folks who are waiting for the juiciest of juicy stories about Elliot Broidy, it turns out that Elliot Broidy has a history of paying off and, in some cases, claiming undue credit, let's say, for the affairs of politicians that he's trying to bribe. In other words,
oh my God, he monetized being the
yes.
the beard. Oh
yeah.
my God,
he's did it, and he's done it before. And they have and here, who's got it here? A great catch from Andrew Prokop, which we'll trace the provenance of, about a 2009 conviction for such a thing. We'll be right back.
Holy moly.
Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am talking my way out of the break. There's so many tabs I have open that I'm not going to get to. But here's the juicy stuff that we were waiting for. And now I can, now it can be revealed that I can figure out the provenance of this whole story. I am reading, I have it open in front of me, Paul Campos's, I guess, latest. This time, we read the other day his story that threw out for us, finally, formally in long form, the theory that it wasn't Elliot Broidy who had an affair with and presumably impregnated and then paid for the abortion of the other Playboy playmate that was caught up in all of this stuff. And somewhere in here I'll finally pick up the name and get it right. And I was asked for it earlier in the show on the side, and I tweeted it out, and if I can just find it, here we are, because it was Thelonious asking, does anybody know the name of the playmate who Broidy allegedly impregnated? And the answer is Shira Bechard, B-E-C-H-A-R-D.
I remember the year she was Playmate of the Year. How about that?
Do you? Okay, well, that's something. What's the answer to that?
2010.
2010. All right. Congratulations, then. I'm a little belated in that. And really, is there anything I could possibly offer you by way of congratulations that you haven't already gotten from so many others? All right.
From Elliot Broidy.
Yeah, right. Big payoff for that. This is, so it's the latest entry from Paul Campos. This time he's writing over at Lawyers, Guns, and Money blog. And he starts off by crediting, for the information, a great catch, he says, by Andrew Prokop. Andrew Prokop, a reporter for Vox, Vox.com. So, by the way, in case you need an explainer of what is Vox.com, visit Vox.com for the fantastic explainer. And now we'll explain to you, I guess, what sex is and all of that, and you'll be well informed. But here's the great catch. Elliot Broidy, he says, and I'm sure this is probably part of a tweet storm, but it's not all linked. Elliot Broidy even has a history of paying off the girlfriend of the public official he is bribing. And there's a link here to some information which is also included in a screenshot right beneath. Broidy, it says here, has paid over $90,000 to the girlfriend of a high-ranking OSC official, and it's a New York City official, I think, from April 2004 through October 2005. That's the catch, and here's what Paul Campos does with it. Elliot Broidy, not only bribes public officials, he has bribed at least one by paying off his girlfriend. In other words, if you thought it was too far of a stretch to be believed that Elliot Broidy would step in and pay off a Trump girlfriend $1.6 million by claiming to be the father of her child after their exclusive sexual affair, then you are wrong, and history proves it. This from Elliot Broidy's 2009 allocution, in which he ratted out his fellow co-conspirators to avoid prison time so that he could be free to do it again, despite paying more than $1 million in bribes in exchange for getting $250 million in public money steered to his private equity firm. And remember, everybody, private equity firms show the genius of private capital and the free markets, not like you losers sucking at the government teat. Just thought I'd throw that one out there. How do you start a private equity firm? Steal $250 million in public money. Obviously. Duh. So, here's the allocution here. Broidy paid over $90,000 to the girlfriend of a high-ranking OSC official from April 2004 through October 2005. The payments were used to cover the girlfriend's living expenses and rent. Broidy also covered the girlfriend's hospital bills. Broidy also... Hospital bills? Yeah. She stubbed her toe very, very badly. Broidy also agreed to pay $5,500 a month to a relative of the girlfriend. Wow. Beginning in October 2003 for a total of $44,000. These payments were concealed through a sham loan agreement between Broidy and the relative. So Michael Cohen, of course, says, oh, yeah, the money came from a home equity loan. That's what you say, because the coincidences never end with these guys, writes Campos on this one, and all he's adding is the commentary here. Reminder, until 4 weeks ago, Broidy was the co-chair of the RNC's Finance Committee. The other co-chair, of course, Michael Cohen. At this point, he says the showrunners are just out of control. And that's a good way of putting it, tongue-in-cheek, but point taken. The two co-chairs of the Republican National Committee's Finance Committee are fraudsters through and through, and also are experts in A, stealing public money, and B, redirecting that public money to the sex partners of preferred politicians. I find that weird and troubling, to say the least. And if you had, like I said, I just want to put that out there, if you had any difficulty with, yeah, but what proof do you have? And this is still not proof that Elliot Broidy didn't have this affair with this Playboy playmate and that Trump did. It's not really proof of either one of those things. But if you're having difficulty finding a basis in reality for it besides, well, it sounds like it could be true, I guess we have some additional information for you. Elliot Broidy has done this before. And another, by the way, interesting piece of information. Remember, Paul Campos's piece was based largely on, well, circumstantial evidence, but don't forget, circumstantial evidence is still evidence. It's just not all by itself excellent proof or direct proof of things. It just simply says, well, this is a habit this guy particularly tends to lean on, and now he's doing it again. This is another little piece of the puzzle. One that Campos pointed out yesterday, which is that, what's her name, Béchard, looks exactly like everybody else that Donald Trump has had affairs with, including his daughter, who I don't think he had an affair with. But, you know, his favorite line with women is, you remind me so much of my daughter. And that's because he's bedding clones of his daughter. But, you know, whatever. And, but that's just one of the weird coincidences that makes us think that maybe Donald Trump did it. And the other is, I don't know anything about her. I mean, she might be brilliant. Béchard, I forget her first name. But
Sean, I think.
This is, you'll never believe it, this is another foreign model. She's Canadian. She's not Eastern European. That would have been just too much. Another foreign model living in the United States, mysteriously, nobody can explain it, under another one of these extraordinary genius Einstein visas. Why? I don't know how. I don't know. Her contribution, apparently her biggest contribution to the world of the arts, which you might say, well, the arts are serious, was playing in a movie the role of a mute person. Which, there are mute people and they need to be represented in film. And I'm not saying I'm anti-disability or whatever. This is not ableist. I'm not trying to be an ableist. I may be accidentally walking right into it. But to whom do you give in films the role of playing the mute person? And the answer is the girlfriend who's a model who can't act.
Do you know who processed the application for her Einstein visa?
Hitler or possibly Cohen. I don't know which. No, I don't. I actually don't know. But Cohen can't fill out paperwork
seeing if
correctly.
It's the same lawyer that Melania uses.
Oh, that's a good question. Or Paolo Zampoli, or whatever his name is, the guy who's now running around.
Oh, my God, it was him.
Yeah, maybe. Did you look it up?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
It was Zampoli?
No.
Or
sorry, it's the same lawyer that Melania Trump uses.
Oh, okay. Well, that is also bad. What's his name?
Michael Wildis.
He probably was hoping to stay under the radar for the rest of his life. Welcome to the big leagues, dude.
He's a good immigration lawyer. Full disclosure, I know him.
Okay. Well, cool. You can ask him.
He's a good lawyer.
I'm sure he is. He got this ridiculous visa for, I don't know. I mean, she's clearly talented. I mean, okay. I don't mean to denigrate the fact that, I don't know, there's some kind of talent involved, and not everybody can be in Playboy. Not everybody wants to be. But among those who do, I assume 99% don't make it. But genius, why couldn't you stay Canadian and do it? Why they couldn't go with the cameras to Canada and take pictures and put it in Playboy? I bet they do that all the time. It could even be the theme for a pictorial. I'm just thinking out loud here. I don't know. I don't really know. That's not the juiciest thing in the world, but it certainly establishes a pattern that you'd have to be an idiot to come away with this and say, oh, yeah, I'm sure it wasn't really Donald Trump. Because, look, Elliot Brody said it was him. But he does this all the time. He covers up for other politicians. And I don't know, every other piece of this puzzle fits with Donald Trump's weird proclivities. And, I mean, they're not that weird. For a rich, powerful guy who likes blonde Playboy models. Well, that seems common.
The P-Tab says otherwise about the weird part, but we'll...
Yes. All right. I just found that the whole thing rather amazing, and I'm sure that will be the focus of a lot of introspection in Donald Trump's life. He'll be talking with his spiritual advisor shortly about it, I'm sure. I just found that kind of weird. So we'll just lay that alongside everything else, including the attempt in Trump world to make the receipt of all of this information that led to the cracking of these various cases by Michael Avenatti as somehow criminal. I was just standing there and somebody gave me great information, and there's really nothing I can do about that. And that part of it is not criminal. If there's a leak, you could look into whether it was a criminal leak, but I don't think so. And most of the stuff that's coming his way, including, I guess, the suspicious activity reports, is government-generated stuff, and I don't know if it's considered classified per se, but we'll see. We'll find out. All right. I know you had another point to make, though.
I did. This is the 15 minutes of why Kagro was right. All
right.
I recall, and I'm sure you recall, that during the entire let's not look back, let's go forward era of early Obama administration on specifically torture, Eric Holder, of course, made that statement. And my recollection was that you were adamantly critical of that, because if there's no consequences, there's no lessons.
Oh, yeah. That was a big preoccupation. And then, I was given to understand in no uncertain terms early on in the administration that this is not something we're going to wrestle with. Nope.
Right. There was no Truth Commission. There was no prosecutions. There was no anything.
And
to your credit, I was not nearly.
You're not. Oh, I either have lost you or you've gone on to
No,
mute.
I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
all right. So
I just got an insulting tweet response.
Son of a bitch! I can't believe that guy.
What did I do now?
Oh, okay.
So the proof of your objections comes true yesterday. Because in 2009, the argument was, look, and this was really the context of John Brennan, most likely, and prosecutions. John Brennan, who was the CIA director in the Obama administration, the second one. It started with Panetta, of course, because there were objections to Brennan. And then eventually objections sort of washed away. But John Brennan did a mea culpa and made sure that he made clear that under no circumstances was torture moral or legal or anything we should ever consider. And if Obama asked him to, or if anybody asked him to, he'd report them to the authorities and go to The Hague immediately.
No. All right.
And that was okay. At least he said that. So what are we left with now, though? Gina Haspel, who is Donald Trump's nominee for the position. Donald Trump, who famously, of course, not only wants to reinstate torture, but wants to kill people's families.
Yes.
In retribution, or threatened to, at the very least, as we talked about yesterday, had nominated Gina Haspel, who was directly involved, ran a dark prison in Malaysia where people were waterboarded by her instructions. Yeah. She was a torturer.
Yes.
Not the person doing the waterboarding, but the person saying, waterboard him.
You should go do that. Yeah, and it's okay. And if you do it, we'll get your back.
And, that made it a problem in the first place. But the testimony, of course, of Gina Haspel yesterday made it worse. She simply did not condemn torture. She was said, well, we were told that we're not doing it anymore, and I'm not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And then they're asked, well, what if you're told to do it again? Well, no one's going to ask me to do that. What are you talking about? Donald Trump says we should do it again.
Hurry up and do it again.
He wouldn't do that. What do you mean he wouldn't do that? He's doing it now. He did it on Twitter just yesterday.
Nah, he didn't. I don't know would she ask that question? Or
about
just that
Twitter?
Was people?
No,
that was just people commenting at the periphery.
About the Twitter.
Yeah.
Because he's basically saying you're the right person for the job because you did torture. That's why I'm picking you.
Yeah, well, that could be it. I found the whole thing kind of
it was a terrible
upsetting.
Hearing. It was too short. When someone like Panetta,
Susan Collins bought it.
Well, not even a sternly worded letter from her this time.
Right.
She's terrible. Susan Collins is what she is. We've known it. She's proven it.
Yeah.
Let's just stop messing around. John McCain, of course, came out and opposed Gina Haspel from Arizona. I don't think he can get back to vote against her, which actually is important. It's because if he could come back, that's 2 votes more that Republicans would need to confirm her. But as it is, there's only going to be 99 votes, and to win a 99 votes, you just would need 50.
Right.
If Rand Paul caves, as he always does, then the Democrats couldn't stop it. Joe Manchin's already a yes, of course, because he's Joe Manchin.
Right. They need that in the coal
Peter
mines.
Blades writes a good piece there this morning. And the point being, this is all happening because, as you said at the time that it would happen, this is you being right, what's going to happen is you don't do anything about it. Nobody suffers any consequences. And a few years later, the torturers are going to come in and just keep doing it.
Yes, the next Republican administration will do this and worse. And, I had my chance, and who cares if, David Waldman tells you that.
It's important to understand. It's important to point out that we should listen to the people who got it right. And I'll give you another example. Eli Lake writes a piece talking about Iran only responds to blah hard pressure. And his example is, look how they reacted after we invaded Iraq. Now, Eli Lake is wrong about literally everything, but people keep pretending that he's some serious person.
Oh.
The Iraq War was the greatest thing that ever happened to Iran. You took out his mortal enemy.
There is that.
You basically turned Iraq into basically an ally in de facto of Iran. There's no. How can you argue that the Iraq War proves that being belligerent with Iran is what's going to work? Makes no sense.
Yeah. How simple would you can do this by other means, I guess, these days, but how simple would it be to coordinate Iranian policy in Syria absent the current Iraq? With Saddam Hussein standing physically between Iran and Syria, how big of a player in Syria can Iran be with Saddam Hussein in the way? And I guess it's entirely possible. After all, Iran was capable of playing even further away, Lebanon, Gaza even. But it's certainly a different story getting, manpower and material to Syria across, like a land bridge across northern Iraq, if it's not Saddam Hussein's Iraq. I just, besides the fact that, Iran, nothing could be better than the empowerment of Eastern Iraq's Shia majority than toppling Saddam Hussein.
Yeah, and to tie it into my main point, let's stop listening to the people who are always wrong. Maybe we listen to people who get it right.
That would be nice. We don't like to do that, and hippies are stupid. So, we don't. It's a long tradition. It's sad, and it should be pointed out when it's the case. But it's true. I don't know how else to put it. I was able to get that opportunity to say the very next Republican president, no matter who it is. God help you if anybody could have predicted it was going to be Donald Trump. I'm sure I would have been laughed out of the room if I had said, "What if Donald Trump is the next president?" But I don't know. What if he is, or whoever? Pick your guy. It doesn't really matter. But the next Republican president is going to have every incentive to undo everything that you do. And I guess it could have been seen as a larger warning too, although I didn't present it as such. That the way you're doing things, it's good, it's the correct process, but don't forget that everything that you will think will be your legacy can be undone, especially if the next Republican president is an unscrupulous, underhanded, lying thief. But if he's not, it could all still be undone because of the approach you're taking to doing things, and it's great to the lawful, logical, careful accumulation of evidence and establishment of legal positioning, etc. It's fantastic in any other context. But you've just replaced a totally lawless regime that was put in place by what everybody viewed as the mainstream of the Republican Party. It wasn't anything weird. Now add something weird and you're really going to go haywire. But the mainstream Republican Party can be counted on to undo all of this. In other words, the Constitution's dictates against torture are respected by Democrats and not by Republicans, and this is public knowledge and policy, and people will head to the polls in 2012 and 2016 with that in mind. It may be that you do a good enough job over the next 4 years that it doesn't become an issue in 2012, but when you're done, what happens? And, well, you're looking for, the actual answer from the president was, you're speaking in euphemisms here, is talking about that there needs to be some process of accountability. And you're really saying there need to be prosecutions. And, you should just come out and say it. When you talk to the president of the United States, you speak in euphemisms. You don't issue orders to the president. But I guess I could have done that. Sure, there should be prosecutions or something like it. Or truth and reconciliation approach, if you prefer. But minus that, what do you think you're going to get? Well, moving on. Okay, we'll just leave it there.
Well, moving on, I will give you one kind of funny thing that just happened. Donald Trump tweeted out this about 20 minutes ago. The following Senator crying Chuck Schumer fought hard against the bad Iran deal, all caps, even going at it with President Obama, and then voted against it. Now he says I should not have terminated the deal, but he doesn't really believe that. Same with Comey. Thought he was terrible until I fired him. And Chuck Schumer responds in a quote tweet, #BeBest.
Yes. That's
Very
it?
Good.
Just
Senator
the
Schumer's,
best. Oh, okay.
Twitter operator. Good job.
Yeah, all right. That's true. Well, but although I will say that's maybe the best point Donald Trump has had on the subject yet, although, it's easily answerable in a real debate, but...
It is. It's very answerable. That was then.
But it's a good point.
It's a point that if you thought the deal was bad, why you're upset that it's being broken? Well, here's why. Because once we're in a deal, we have different, to use the intelligence community phrase, equities. We need to be seen as being credible international negotiators. It could be that having done the deal, we're going to be worse off breaking it just as a general matter, not just on the question of credibility in general, but specifically, okay, it was a bad deal, I wouldn't have done it, but breaking it now is worse for us than keeping it as a substantive matter. Simple enough. But again, the crying Chuck Schumer point is, okay, you just stood there with your wife
no,
and
he
pretended
sat
all these
while
things.
she
And
stood.
that was, 3 days ago?
Yeah. And he sat. I don't know whether he stood at all during the thing, but the picture I have of him is sitting at that stumpy little desk that they bring out for him to sign things when he's outside. But okay, right. No one really thought he cared about it. All right, well, Melania, whatever.
She just needs to shut up about that. It doesn't. Yeah. She simply can't do it.
Yeah. Right? I mean, I guess. On the other hand, you could just say, well, it doesn't matter. So give her something constructive to do. That's a nice thing to advocate for. You're never going to get anywhere with your husband, but we don't expect. I'm not going to hold you responsible for what he does. That's fine. I have enough trouble holding him responsible. One thing I meant to bring up, by the way, I didn't watch the Haspel stuff closely enough, though. Again, I watched the right people watch it. I wanted to put on record one of the other things that I made a big deal about during not only, even before the Obama administration, when Democrats took back the House after the 2006 elections, and then continuing into the Obama administration, my theme of, we took impeachment off the table, yada, yada. We're going to have oversight. And again, you're not going to get your oversight. You're not getting your oversight. You got, even at that point in 2007, you had Bush administration officials ignoring subpoenas, walking out of oversight hearings when they didn't feel like answering questions, or not showing up. We're now beginning to see that happening too. Trump administration officials simply not showing up to offer their testimony when called. But one of the things that needs some mention from the Haspel thing, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be doing any of that torture stuff again, and you can take that to the bank. Not only was she, on the ground and approving of torture, and now say, oh, no, the president won't ask me to do it again. I don't think we should forget that her role in destroying the evidence of that torture, for which she was under court order not to. So, I mean, how you think you're going to perform adequate oversight over someone with her record of torture in addition to her record of defying court orders and destroying evidence so that she doesn't get pinched on this stuff. I don't know how you think you're going to do that when you make her the director of the CIA on top of all this. You're just doomed. You're going to have the same, there's going to be requests for torture. She's going to comply with them, and she thinks it's okay to destroy all evidence of her compliance with those orders, even if the courts catch her and step in. And there's still nothing. And I don't know why the courts have never held her accountable for that. I don't know enough about that story other than, what else do you have to know besides that she did that? So, I don't know. We're out of time, of course, for today. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. And you're welcome to come back and grouse about it with me tomorrow as well.
Okay.
I'm doing the whole show as Donald Trump tomorrow, no matter what that guy says.
Well,
I'm not really
he is the president.
Yeah, oh yeah, right. I mean, our own show fans. I'm going to turn you off, I swear. All right, well, at any rate, thank you, Armando, for chiming in and reminding us of what was going on yesterday. That was a major story that we didn't get to talk about.
It was horrifying, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But it was predicted by David Waldman.
Yeah, and pretty much anybody else with a moral compass. I think, but not all of us. But we're too credulous in some cases. Thanks very much, Armando. Stay tuned for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next. I'll use this short break to scan the items upcoming for the most juicy part.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, all the top stories are the ones you would expect. Let's move down to the bottom here, where a group of U.S. Senate Democrats said they would oppose Trump's nominee to head the Justice Department's criminal division over his ties to a Russian bank allied with the Kremlin. That and much, much more coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.